Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest has been an icon of the screen since films like At Close Range, Stand By Me, Lost Boys, Young Guns, and eventually he dominated television with a little show called 24. Well, now he's moved to streaming by taking his formerly ABC show Designated Survivor over to Netflix. And with that move, Kiefer Sutherland and team have updated the show with a newfound sincerity and an in-depth take on America's political process. Let's take a look.
Eleanor, what's going on?
I have decided to put my name in for the Democratic nomination.
Wow. I thought when we spoke about you taking this position, you said that you didn't want to be president.
I didn't know you wanted to run. You didn't consult me before you made your announcement. You didn't consult with anyone.
I'm sorry, Eleanor. I didn't realize my decision to run had to be cleared by you.
It's not just that. My office provided a variety of perfectly viable policy advisements for the State of the Union. You didn't listen to a one of them.
So what, now you're running out of petulance?
No, sir. I am running because it is becoming clear that you and I have different visions for the future of this country. You would be better served by a vice president who can toe the line.
You know what? I'm not going to argue with you, fine. Stay for the vote, and then you're free to go off and share your vision with the rest of America. But you're not going to do that, are you? You won't let me have this win, even though you know it's the right thing for the country. So you think I'm illegitimate, too?
Everybody, please welcome the great Kiefer Sutherland.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
I am such a huge fan of your work, man. Going back to the beginning of your work, At Close Range is maybe one of my favorite movies of all time.
Thank you very much.
There's a small part of yours in that movie, but it was one of your first roles, right?
It was the very first role I did in the United States. I went from that to Stand By Me. Sean Penn was the guy who advocated for me and hired me, and Sean Penn was the actor that when I got off the plane in the U.S., that's the guy I wanted to be like. So
wow.
It was really, really gracious of him.
Did he know you prior to advocating for you, or was it he saw your tape or
he had
not
seen
tape at that time, I guess?
He had seen two films I had done in Canada, and primarily the Bay Boy, directed by Dan Petrie, and had Lee Ullman and Peter Donat and some wonderful actors. But that was the first big film I got to do.
Oh, wow. So Designated Survivor, moving over to Netflix, how did this happen? What took place here?
Well, Netflix had Designated Survivor all around the world. The only territory that it didn't have was the U.S. And so, for whatever reasons, ABC really was changing their entire lineup and made a decision that Designated Survivor no longer fit in that. And so within a day or two, I had already heard from the Mark Gordon Company that they were already in discussions with Netflix to continue on with it. And then Neil Baer came on board as a writer. And yeah, just from there, it just kind of took off. And
now, can I ask, has that changed your guys' approach to telling the story? Because I know with a network like ABC, there's a fair amount of, I don't want to say control, but they have a different kind of hand in the product than Netflix does.
And it's not ABC. Network television
Yeah.
is network television. There's a reason why Jack Bauer said "damn it" all the time, because there was no other expletive he was allowed to use. Having said that, what's really interesting is the first thing most people say, oh, so you got to do the show with Netflix, so you get to swear. My character doesn't swear. It's not who he is. So we kind of really, what we took advantage of was that a lot of network shows, and we had this on 24 as well, but specifically with Designated Survivor, they have interests all around the world. Those companies are huge. And so they're not happy if you use the word China or Russia or North Korea. And when you're doing a political show that's having a crisis with North Korea and you make up a country's name, it kind of loses its impact. And so
like you're watching a Marx Brothers movie at that point.
Well, it's
right?
just, it becomes less sincere. And so one of the great things, and that's not network television's fault, that's what it is. And I've had 10 years worth of great experiences on network television, so I'm not putting it down. But we got more latitude in telling this specific story. And so that was something that Neil Baer as a writer and his team leaned into, and therefore the cast were the beneficiaries of that, and we leaned into it as well.
When you say more latitude in telling this story, I'm sure it goes beyond just using a country's name or cursing. Does it go into how you tell the stories, how they get sort of
how we tell the stories and what kinds of stories? We'll deal with. We have the luxury of dealing with sexuality in the workplace. We have the luxury of dealing with the nation's perception of transgender people in its country. And so we could deal with certain topics that might make network television a little uncomfortable, which I think, obviously, the deeper you can get into a story, certainly within the context of a political story in the United States, to be able to deal with cultural issues around the country and lean into those issues, I think you make a more profound statement about Neil's and mine and the cast perspective of what's happening in the country.
Yeah, I don't mean this in any way against ABC. As you said, it's just a different business model, so it
Yes.
has to be a different thing. But what I was struck by the first episode of this new season on Netflix was a different tone of sincerity going into the topics that have to be covered. Because on network TV, you kind of have to move like this. So you have to throw your stories at the wall. With this, you get to really stick with how what your character believes in and why he is pursuing something and how the world is impacted by that or how the world feels about that, even just going into these sort of pieces of documentary footage that are used.
Yeah, well, and in all fairness, first of all, thank you. And the credit for that really goes to Neil Baer. He and that writing staff had a very strong perspective of the story that they wanted to tell, how they were going to utilize the brand of Designated Survivor and move forward with that. And I think also, in all fairness, you have to understand the difference of knowing that you're doing a 10-episode arc as opposed to 22 episodes. It allows you to become much more focused.
Right.
It's much easier to see the beginning, the middle, and the end of a story in that kind of time frame. And there's a real reason why everything from FX and AMC and cable shows like that are doing 10 to 12 episodes tops. Some are doing even as small as 8. And I think people are finally realizing we're much better off giving you 10 episodes of something great than 22 episodes of something that's kind of could have been great or mediocre. When I look back on my experience with 24 and that writer's room headed by Howard Gordon, the fact that they accomplished 24 episodes a year for 9 years is extraordinary. That's writing the equivalent of 12 feature films a year. No one is that prolific. And so it's an incredible task. So again, we had the benefit of a 10-episode season. We had the benefit of Neil Baer and his incredible experience from ER to SVU and all the work that he's done over the last 20 years. And he put together a great team. And then again, Netflix basically said, go make the show you want to make.
What is it like for you right now to play a sincere, thoughtful, caring, decent president right now?
Well, it's, there's two things that I bounce off
Not a bumbling
of.
fucking fool.
There's two. I'm not even going to go there with that. But there's two things that I go back and forth with, and one is actually because I've done this series for quite a while. One is how much I miss the exhilaration of, like, if you've just got a problem, shoot someone. And that was Jack Bauer, and I forgot how much fun that really was, running down the street chasing someone and then just like, oh, forget it, bang, bang, bang. There was something very visceral about that. This is a much more thoughtful person and really honestly wants to do what is best for the country. What is interesting about season 3 is he's challenged by the fact that I think all of us, when confronted with a situation, almost instinctually know what the right thing to do is. And people generally ask 2 questions, and it would be great if they only asked the one, what's the right thing to do? But we ask 2. And the first one is, what's the right thing to do? You come up with that answer very quickly, and then you say, what's the best for me? And that's politics. Yeah. And I think for the first 2 seasons, Tom Kirkman asked 1 question. And this season, he's asking 2. And so he is going to be deeply challenged by his desire to govern and what he thinks is going to be the right thing, how will he morally sacrifice himself to do that? And that, unfortunately, I think is a problem in politics, not only in America, but around the world. I think the second you choose to run for power, you've already made a choice that is very selfish.
Maintain that power. In order to maintain that power, you have to.
And so it's you have to make compromises and deals with the devil, and so the days of our perception of Abe Lincoln are gone. And I don't think it was that simple for Abe Lincoln either. So it's my experience in kind of making the show and all of the research that I had done has led me to believe that it really is a kind of vicious cycle. And the people that have managed to stay above it have really just stuck to an ideal four-pronged principle and have just held on to that for dear life. And the fact that some of those people have survived is a miracle. And they end up being the people over time that do the greatest work either in the Senate or the Congress.
Did you have to do a different kind of research going into this season? Did you find that you had to do more research or any sort of different sort of research?
Well, I did. I mean, I'll give you one example. I was very lucky to get access to a week of President Obama's schedule. Wow. And it was mind-blowing. We would work 14-hour days on a television show. We would, get up at 4:30 in the morning, go to work, come home at 6 at night, 7 at night, and then do press and a lot of other things. And you start to think that just at least time-wise, that's a grueling schedule. This guy was working 18 hours a day, and the meeting at the end of the day was trying to solve a military crisis between two Baltic states, and was just as important as the meeting that he had in the morning, trying to deal with military issues from the United States to Iraq and into Afghanistan. So the idea of having each meeting have human results, that if you were successful in the meeting, you might have saved lives. If you were unsuccessful in the meeting, you could have lost lives. To have that kind of responsibility, that many hours a day, that many days a week, was unfathomable to me. And so one of the things from the very beginning when he started was just to try and sew in that kind of sense of exhaustion. And that without the aides and without the people that are around you, you could really make terrible choices because you hadn't thought through the consequences because you're simply that tired.
Was 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. also blocked off for Fox and Friends with him? Or did he have his own show for executive time
No,
he was interested in?
No, not in the context. In the context of our show, people brought him the news because he was already dealing with yesterday's news.
Right. You've been acting for quite some time, since you were, a teenager now?
Yeah, about 14 or 15 was my first job.
How have you kept it engaging, interesting, fascinating for yourself? Has there ever been a moment where you weren't sure if you wanted to keep doing it?
No. Really? No, I love storytelling. Storytelling for me was something that was integrated into me as a person in my family. We had fantastic dinners. My mother, for not being a great cook, was an incredible talker. and I would have dinner with her and my twin sister, and my mother would just tell the funniest stories. And then she was in the theater, and so for many months at a time, my sister and I would take our homework from school and we'd go to the theater, we'd do our homework, and my mother would do her performance, and then we'd walk home, and that was our life. But the people, whether it was the art director or the director or other actors in the play, they were so funny and interesting, and it was always the stories that grabbed me. And so what I love about acting is literally getting together with a group of actors. We all have our own unique perspective on this story that we're going to tell, and a director and a cinematographer and the rest of the crew, and we sit down and we figure out what's the best way to tell this story. And it changes every time, even on 24 that we did 9 seasons of. Every episode is different. Everything because it was a serialized show. Jack Bauer in the first season is not the same Jack Bauer in the 9th. that character got to evolve. And so it was really the storytelling that I've always loved, and I've never lost a love for that.
You were a producer on 24 as well. Did that mean that after a certain point you were kind of with the writers and just sort of talking about where Jack would go?
No, I think one of the great things about 24, and it was a precedent that was really set by Joel Surnow, who created the show. The writers never came onto the floor, which I found out later is very rare in television. And I once asked him.
Usually there's a writer/producer on
and I asked
for
him
their
why.
episode.
And he said, well, I hired the writing staff that I wanted to write the show. I hired the actors that I wanted to act in the show. I hired the DP that I wanted and the director I wanted. And now my job is to let everybody go do their job. And I really respected that because that's not normal. And so I was grateful for that. And so very rarely, Howard Gordon and I are very good friends. I had dinner with him just the other night. If I thought there was a real problem, he and I would go grab a drink and talk about it. But we respected each other's areas. They had the second floor. We had what we called the floor, which was the set. And I think it made for an incredible working environment.
You know, one of my favorite movies that you've been in is a very early Reese Witherspoon movie. It's this movie called Freeway.
Freeway.
It's an insane, crazy satire that I just don't think could be made now. It's crazy that it got made when it got made.
Yeah.
I think it's her maybe like third film or fourth film. It was pre-election at least. What was it like working on a movie like that where every scene you are risking, I mean, there's a vulnerability to the performances in that movie in the sense that you are risking a sense of embarrassment if it's not cut well.
It's a career ender.
Yeah, but it's an incredible movie.
So my first time in an Oval Office set was...
Obama was like, I loved Freeway.
They were shooting Nixon, and Oliver Stone produced Freeway.
Oh, right.
And I didn't want to do it. And so I had turned it down. But I really wanted to do an Oliver Stone movie as a director. So he said, I'd like to meet with you. And so I walked into the set, and he was sitting behind the desk at the Oval Office. And he made me sit down like he was the president and I was like some lackey. And I sat down, and he said, why don't you want to do the movie? And I listed off 4 or 5 reasons. He said, those are so obvious. Come on, why do you really not want to do the movie? And I said, no, that's pretty much it. And he said, I don't know if you can say this, but he said,
say whatever you want.
You don't have the balls to do this. And I was like, yeah, I do. I just don't want to. And he's like, no, you don't. And I said, no, I do. I just don't want to. And by the time I left, I was doing the movie. So I was kind of a sucker for that. Reese is amazing in that film.
She's never done a performance like that. I mean, she does incredible performances, but
and Matthew Bright, who wrote it, the dialogue was just extraordinary. I've never seen a guttermouth like the character that she got to play. And I got to play a guy who smoked through his throat. I mean, it was just so bizarre.
What is that great line where you come into the courtroom and she looks at you and says, look who got beat with the ugly stick.
Yeah.
And you've literally smelled like a hole in your throat and a jaw thing on?
Yeah, and with a halo around my head in a wheelchair. It was just so bizarre. And I remember when it first was seen at Sundance, HBO made the movie and bought the movie, and it was going to be for them. And it had such a successful run on HBO that it finally then got released in theaters. It was completely inverted. And when it was first shown at Sundance, it offended so many people that Oliver Stone went, something's good about this movie. Those were the people that we were dealing with. But I have to be honest, my oldest daughter was at the University of San Francisco at the time and went to the one theater that it was playing in San Francisco with a bunch of her friends, and it became a cult kind of favorite film for the students at that university, and it's the only time my daughter ever thought I was cool for a second, was that I was doing that movie. So for that alone, I was so grateful that I was part of it.
You're like, the Sundance people are booing me, but my daughter thinks I'm cool.
And my daughter is so cool that I thought, oh, that's really nice.
What over the course of your career, what has been the toughest performance for you?
Eye for an Eye, without a doubt.
Really?
Yeah, it was when I took the part on. I really wanted to work with Sally Field.
Yeah.
John Schlesinger directed that film. I really wanted to work with him. The character that I played was just the most despicable guy on the planet. He rapes 2 women in the film. He murders 3 women in the movie. One of them is Sally Field's daughter. And unless that character is that bad and played with no remorse, then the rest of the film doesn't work. And so as an actor, I leaned into that in a very strong way. Having said that, I had 2 daughters of my own. The whole makeup of the character for me was, what's the thing I'm most afraid of for my kids? It's this guy. And there was a scene that I had to do, attack a young girl, and she was about 22 years old, but she looked like she was 15. And we'd gone over the blocking, and the blocking, for those of you who don't know, is just what we're going to do in the scene, and literally mapped it out to, I'm going to touch your shoulder here for about 2 seconds, I'm going to push you down, I'm going to grab for your blouse at this point, then I'm going to grab your other shoulder, I'm going to hold you down, I'm going to get my legs around you, and literally work through this entire sequence. And we did it almost half a day. And then we went to shoot it, and right before we went to shoot it, I said, look, everything that we've worked up here is going to come at you 10 times stronger. Don't panic. I'm in complete control. But it's going to be shocking to you. It's going to alarm you a bit. So just know that out of the gate. And we did the thing, and within the context of what we were trying to do, it couldn't have gone better. And they yelled, cut, and she just broke down crying. And I said, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. And I just picked her up and walked her off stage and just held her for the longest time. And she kept apologizing, saying, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I know we've gone through everything. I don't know why I'm crying, because it was horrific. And it was the only moment that I thought, this wasn't worth it. You know, it doesn't deserve to make anybody feel like that. And this person and I were friends, you know, and still are. But it upset me so much that she had to have such a visceral reaction to make that feel real. And there was a point there where I just felt that was too much of a cost. So that arguably, not even arguably, hands down, was the most difficult part I'd ever had to play.
Was Schlesinger like, we got it?
No, John's a tough guy. And certainly the guys coming out of the 70s, all they wanted was their shot.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
They were directors like that. He was keenly aware of how affected she was. And he was, he didn't come over. He let me take her off, and we dealt with it. And then when we both walked back on, everybody gave her a standing ovation. But no, when I was walking out, he patted me on the butt and said, well done. And I was like, yeah, I feel awful right now, but thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed recently, prior to this interview, you have been posting like recipe videos. You've been doing like essentially your own cooking show.
Well, I wouldn't call it that, but yes, I have been posting videos of me cooking, and it started, as most dumb ideas do, with a couple drinks, and someone said, you should post some of your simple videos, because I cook for my friends, and I have a band, and none of them can really cook, and so someone said you should post one of those videos of like a really simple dish, because I was talking to them about why I learned to cook in the first place, and I was scared of poisoning my kids.
That's why you learned to cook.
Yeah, well, poultry, you can do some real damage if you kind of slow cook it. You can salmonella, and you can do some real damage with that.
I get yelled at by my partner all the time because of when I'm cooking chicken. Clean everything.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Yeah. Just throw it in.
Yeah, and it's I was actually watching a movie called Accidental Tourist and didn't realize that you could kill an entire family if you slow roast a turkey for 15 hours. So I went to cooking class so that I would have 4 or 5 kind of very simple traditional meals that I can make for my kids on any night of the week. And then I fell in love with it. Yeah. And so we did the first video, which is a real simple steak. I think that video was maybe 4 minutes long.
Last one I watched was a stew.
The stew
was about
35
minutes long. Yeah,
half-hour video. But people started texting back. Like, I was amazed, because I don't spend a lot of time out there in the netherworld of the internet. But I was amazed by the responses, and people were actually trying it. And so we did a roast chicken and did a beef and oyster sauce, and then yes, the stew, which unfortunately is my favorite recipe, is more involved and takes a half an hour to watch. But The disclaimer that I put at the beginning of every video is, if you know how to cook, go find something else to watch, because this is really basic stuff.
It's for the people who don't know, which is great. I mean, everybody should know how to cook in some way. It's a real tragedy if you don't know how to cook anything.
Well, because you might find out, first of all, if you make something that actually tastes good and that you like, all of a sudden you like cooking.
It's so satisfying.
It's really simple.
Yeah. I hate to backtrack, but we just talked about what the hardest movie was for you, and then we talked about Freeway, which is another dark movie. I'm curious, what was the most fun you ever had on a movie set? We'll have a light one in there as well.
Well, I often look back at films like, easily the most fun I ever had was Young Guns. A bunch of guys in their early 20s on horseback with guns. I mean, it's not going to get better than that. And we were shooting a Western, which is predominantly in daylight in Santa Fe, New Mexico in winter. So we could only work 8 hours a day. And we discovered the bar at the Sheraton Hotel, all of us together, and probably had the best 3.5 months we've all had. I mean, and we're all still friends, and we all still talk about that experience with relish. Having said that, we didn't have as much fun on the second movie, which I think is the better film.
Really?
Yeah. We finally had to go to work. But like when I think of Stand By Me and Lost Boys, we had so much fun on those too. And I think I was so young, I just thought this is what every day was going to be like for the rest of my life. And so I took it for granted. And I wish I had been a little more mature at the time, so that I realized how lucky I was to have been a part of kind of that string of films.
I think everybody feels that way about their 20s.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well,
I think I have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who has a question? Right here.
hey.
Hi, good afternoon. Playing such a successful character such as Jack Bauer and being seen as television's one of the most badass characters, can you share an experience where the character Jack Bauer has affected your personal life?
No, I think not really. No, the only funny story that I have, and I'm forgetting the name of the gentleman. He was on Saturday Night Live for a long time. I was driving down Olympic Boulevard in Los Angeles, and the traffic was moving kind of slow, and I saw this old woman kind of waddling with like 6 bags of groceries and a cane, and I kept thinking, my gosh, this lady's walked an awfully long way, because there isn't a supermarket for miles in any direction. And as I'm thinking that, 2 guys run up behind her and grab her purse and steal her purse. And I throw my car in park, put on the emergency brake, come flying out. I chase one of them down. I hit him, knock him down. I grab the other one. I put him up against a tree. And before I know it, the old lady is hitting me on the back with a cane, yelling, "Stop, stop, we're making a movie." And I went, "What?" And I turned around, and it was a bunch of film school students dressed up in ridiculous garb. And the one guy's across the street with a camera going, "Sorry." And oh my God, then I had to apologize to these boys. And it was a boy dressed up as an old lady. And so being heroic will always backfire on me. So now I just stay in my car and hope they're making a movie. Yeah.
I imagine that you felt immediately like, "Whoa, learned my lesson on that one."
I was so humiliated, embarrassed, and that guy was hurt, and so I felt awful about him. And they understood, and they actually years later told the story on a late night talk show, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's the guy." So it was.
So one of the guys was a cast member from SNL.
Became one. Yeah.
Became one.
Yeah.
Oh wow! You don't remember? You don't remember exactly what?
No, I'm really horrible about that. But he's incredibly funny, and so anyway, that would be the closest, and it certainly backfired.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Cheers.
Did you ever see the "It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia" episode where they named their junkyard cat Agent Jack Bauer?
No. No.
That goes nowhere then. One more question, right here.
You walked by me one way and the other, and I cannot believe you're sitting this close and I'm talking to you.
Well, bless your heart.
Thank you. Is there anybody that still, after this huge career that you have, that has you starstruck?
There are a lot, but I would say the first one was Gene Hackman. Other than my father, really my favorite actor alive. And this was about 20, 25 years ago. And I've wanted to meet him so badly, and I've wanted to work with him so badly. And he was having dinner in the same restaurant, and I think one of the common denominators of all actors is that we're unique opportunists. And I was like, this is my chance. I'm going to go tell him how much I like his work, and thank you very much. And I got within 10 feet of the table and went, oh, go sit down. And I just turned right back around and sat down and left the poor man in peace. But
Yeah, I can't think of another actor that would be like a worse thing to do with.
yeah, it's you know, he's just, even in films like Invasion of the Killer Bees, he doesn't have a false moment. He's in my opinion, a perfect actor. But the truth is, the list is so long. There's just extraordinary people out there, actors, musicians, etc.
Kiefer, congratulations on season 3 of Designated Survivor and an incredible, illustrious, long career that you've had. It's been a
Lucky.
And lucky as well, for you to say, not for me.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Designated Survivor premieres on Netflix June 7th. Kiefer Sutherland, everybody. Let's hear it.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.